listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here in another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in. Glad to have you along for the ride. Making our way here through another week. And as we get set to dive into this episode, things from a commitment, signing, transferring angle of things have kind of come to a bit of a stopping point for LSU at the moment. Now, of course, there's still visits happening. We told you about the big offensive tackle from Washington State who's expected to take a visit. They have the big defensive lineman that Bo Davis has a relationship from Texas in for a visit. You just had Tawfiq Byer, the safety, in for a visit. So the wheels are still turning, and we've told you about, the guys coming in and whatnot. You're just kind of waiting on more commitments to pop. Of course, you're still waiting on Braylon Moore, the center out of Virginia Tech. So there will still be news coming. It could come later today, but at the time of this recording, things have kind of come to a standstill after the commitment and signing of wide receiver Nick Anderson. So we'll keep our eye on it here as we go through things today. And if anything pops while I'm, recording the episode, we'll obviously give you thoughts on it. But since it's kind of at a standstill, what I wanted to do is kind of talk about the bowl game a little bit because, LSU plays a bowl game in a little less than 2 weeks against Baylor in Houston on New Year's Eve at 2:30. Now, yes, the outcome of this game, I don't care. LSU can win, LSU can lose. It doesn't matter. I'm not really going to be like, hey, what am I looking for here? There are things I'm looking for, and when we get closer to the game, we'll have plenty of time to talk about those things that I'm looking for and actually want to see from LSU. Because those things, sure, and a lot of it deals with the younger players. But this is an interesting matchup with Baylor. And it kind of dovetails into the younger guys because Baylor has some skill specifically on the offensive side. And it's going to be a really nice test for a lot of younger players that you'll see on the defensive side for LSU. So kind of want to talk a little bit about the game, a little bit about the matchup. And, of course, we know that Bradyn Swinson is going to play in the bowl game and some others. We've been able to decipher that for some practice video, things of that nature. Although you haven't seen many formal announcements, the guys are out there practicing. Chances are that they're going to play. So, obviously, want to dive into a little bit of that because that's been it's become a huge topic around bowl games is opt-outs, transfers, and all of those things. So that's what we'll do here today on LSU Daily, with an eye on the portal if anything pops. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, all of that greatly appreciated. You can follow me on social media as well, at Musso Matthew on Twitter X, Facebook, and Instagram. You find me on Instagram at MatthewMusso1. All of that greatly appreciated as well. Let's dive right into it. We'll start with Bradyn Swinson announcing the news on Wednesday morning that he will participate in LSU's bowl game. The LSU football account, they released a produced video of Swinson making the announcement, him saying, anytime, basically it could be summed up, anytime you get a chance to put on those colors, that helmet, and go out there and play and put out tape, you take the chance and you do it. That's a welcome mindset, I would imagine, for many of you when it comes to bowl games and opt-outs, where it's like, Bradyn Swinson looks like he's pretty much solidified as a day 2 pick in the NFL draft, but he knows potentially more good game tape can go a long way. You can never have enough good tape is kind of the mindset there. And again, I admire that, and I think a lot of you will too. That's kind of what you want to see in this day and age of college football. You're not going to see it a lot because bowl games have just become rather insignificant, or at least they've been realized, I should say, to be rather insignificant. But Bradyn Swinson coming back, obviously huge for LSU. He was your best edge rusher all season long. It's not even really particularly close. He got off to a fast and furious start at one point, threatening LSU's single-season sack record. Of course, that's held by Arden Key. Now, he'd fall a little bit short of that, but, he was up 7 sacks in the first 6 games. He would finish the season with 8.5, so he'd obviously fall short of the record and kind of just slowed down a little bit as he saw more double teams and things of that nature. But it wasn't just the pass rush as well. Bradyn Swinson, he also forced 2 fumbles on the season. He finished third on the team in tackles. So, I mean, he was awesome, and getting 4 back for one last hurrah, that's great. It certainly looks like Savion Jones is going to play as well. There's been no formal announcement one way or the other for him, and as you inch closer, again, it seems like that's going to be the path for him is to play in this game, so you'll have both of your rush ins, which obviously would be huge, and Savion Jones specifically in the running game in this matchup. As for some other guys that we know, I mean, obviously, look, you'll have Greg Penn out there. It's interesting when you look at some of the practice video, you can see and you can decipher the offensive line that's in front of Garrett Nussmeier. We knew Miles Frazier would play. He's been playing right tackle in these bowl preps, which puts Bo Bordelon in at right guard. You talk about an interesting young guy to get a look at. Obviously, Chester. Tyree Adams has been repping left tackle in the bowl practices, which makes an awful lot of sense. He was always their 6th offensive lineman this season when healthy, and they really like the strides that he's made at tackle, and they figure he can be a guy to compete for playing time at one of the tackle spots next season. The thing to really keep an eye on is Garrett Dellinger. And Brian Kelly, when he met with the media previewing the Texas Bowl, like his first media availability of it, he was asked about Garrett Dellinger and if he would be cleared for the bowl game. And Brian Kelly said yes, Garrett Dellinger would be cleared for the bowl game. He'd be able to play. He would just have to make a decision on if he wanted to play or not. Well, for what it's worth, repping with the first team offensive line is Paul Mubenga at left guard, so it's safe to assume that even though Garrett Dellinger hasn't made an official announcement, he seems to have made his mind up and will not play in the bowl game, and that's completely understandable. That's a guy who, quite honestly, graded out as LSU's best offensive lineman pretty much all season long, is going to hear his name called in April in the draft, probably day 2. It goes back to the Swinson thing. You know, you can never put out enough good tape, but coming off of an injury, you don't want to, risk injury heading into your combine training and all of those things. It makes a lot of sense for me, for Garrett Dellinger to maybe step aside. No hard feelings there. So that's what they've been repping so far. That's what you can probably expect in the bowl game. So, look, it's another good test for Paul Mubenga. Bo Bordelon will be really interesting to watch, and how they can keep Garrett Nussmeier clean, and if LSU can continue a little bit of the success that they found in the running game later in the season. When you look at this game kind of as a whole, it's the two teams, I don't want to say carbon copy because I don't think that's true. I mean, Sawyer Robertson's a great player. We'll talk about him here in a minute at quarterback for Baylor. I would obviously take Garrett Nussmeier. I think Nuss is the better of the two players there. But, and I think Brian Kelly's obviously a more proven coach than Dave Aranda. I love Dave Aranda, but I think Brian Kelly's obviously a more proven coach. I don't think that's really arguable. But when you look at them, they're both 8-4. They both lean heavily on their offense, with their defense being the quote-unquote weakness, or really just the weakness of the team, even though LSU's defense has really had some nice moments. For Baylor, we talked about it kind of right when the bowl game was announced. They had a really tough start to their schedule. Started at 2-4. It lightened up, and then they routed off 6 straight wins. And that really kind of solidified Dave Aranda's job, and it seems like they're, back on good terms going forward, which, again, love for Dave. So, basically, though, what I'm getting at there, and I'm sure you've heard this plenty, is I think when we all see Dave Aranda, we remember the great defenses he had at LSU. He does not have that at Baylor this season. They just aren't up to the personnel. They're deficient on the defensive side of the ball, specifically in the back end. Baylor gives up 227 yards per game through the air. That is 84th in the country. LSU, their strength all year has been passing. Now, I can already hear some of y'all maybe talking back to your phone or the radio or however you're listening to the podcast, saying, well, LSU is going to be shorthanded at receiver, and they will. Kyron Lacey accepted an invite to the Senior Bowl. That would imply that he is not going to play in the game. Again, do not blame the guy. Obviously, you've had the exodus in the portal with a guy like C.J. Daniels. Mason Taylor is going to the draft, so you lose him as a pass catcher. They're going to be thin. You have Aaron Anderson. He's been great. You'll see more from Xavion Thomas. Trey'Dez Green is going to be wildly intriguing to watch in this football game because they've moved him to receiver. They're probably going to have to move him back to tight end because you don't have anybody at tight end in this game. So can LSU and how LSU takes advantage of the deficiencies that Baylor has in the back end of their defense will be something interesting to watch. But I think LSU has enough weapons on the offensive side of the ball to be able to do that. All of this leads to a lot of points in the game, because the one thing that Baylor has that LSU doesn't is they have no major opt-outs or transfers or anything really of that nature. Like no big significant guy heading elsewhere, which is rare, obviously, in this day and age of college football. So what they're going to have is continuity, and that matters. Now, look, again, you're looking for certain things. The outcome of this game certainly doesn't matter. LSU beat Purdue 63-7 a couple years ago because half their team left with a coaching change, and their coaches left. Remember, Drew Brees was helping out Purdue coaching in that football game because they were just so shorthanded. But, and LSU took advantage of it. But, the outcome of the game, it's not really what you're after. I will say, the line is flipped from LSU as a favorite to Baylor as a favorite, and your total's sitting just below 60. So, again, a lot of points. I can understand why Baylor's the favorite. Continuity, like we just said, all of those things. Let's talk about a few key players on their offense because that's really where they shine. You look at just about any metric, you don't have to look far to find Baylor. They're mostly in the top 25 nationally when it comes to offense. They're obviously led by Sawyer Robertson at quarterback, and he's a really special, dynamic player. Completed 63% of his passes this season for just over 2,600 yards through 26 touchdowns. Really nice ratio with the interception, only 7 picks to those 26 touchdowns. And he can hurt you a little bit with his legs. He's not going to sit there and run all over you like a Lenora Sellers or a Jalen Milroe or anybody like that. Think maybe more Jackson Dart. He's really, really good when he gets off schedule. That doesn't hurt him. LSU's pass rush versus Sawyer Robertson will be something to watch if you are interested in the outcome of the football game, because that's been a strength of LSU's defense, is pass rush and getting to the quarterback, getting the guy off schedule. Sawyer's been a guy who can extend the play with his feet and keep his eyes downfield and find an open receiver. So when the play breaks down, he's, I don't want to say at his best, but he's really good. And, I mean, the term dynamic does fit Sawyer Robertson. Then you have Bryson Washington, who's a freshman running back who went for over 1,000 yards for Baylor this season, 12 touchdowns. Guy averaged 6 yards per carry. Now, that's very impressive, but what I will say, once again, and I know you're losing some pieces on defense for this bowl game, but what LSU has been very good at is stopping running backs. Since the South Carolina game, when Rocket Sanders went for over 100 yards on you, remember, that was week 3 of the season. So since the South Carolina game, if you've listened to the show, you know what I'm about to say. What am I about to say? How many running backs has LSU allowed to go over 100 yards? If you know it, shout the answer. One. It was Ulysses Bentley for Ole Miss. Went over 100 yards against LSU, and that's it. Since the South Carolina game, just one running back, that's the caveat, running back, has gone for over 100 yards against LSU. I expect them to be able to contain Bryson Washington, but he is a dynamic player at the running back position and a young one. I mean, Baylor's offense is going to be pretty darn good next season as well with Robertson and Washington back. In the receiving room, the passing game, they don't really have one guy that just jumps out as clear cut. I mean, Josh Cameron leads in yards and receptions, but he leads receptions only by 3. He leads yards by a little over 100. And he obviously leads in touchdowns, but they spread the ball around a lot. You got 5 different guys who have caught more than 25 balls. You have 5 different guys that have over 350 yards receiving for this team. So they're going to spread it out. It will be a challenge for LSU secondary. Obviously, Sage Ryan has entered the portal, so you'll probably see some young guys at safety like a Deshaun Spears as well. Your depth has taken a bit of a hit in your secondary here in this portal cycle, but you'll be able to see some younger guys. Communication will be key and going forth with that. But I expect LSU's offense to be able to move the ball as well. And I'm expecting a whole lot of points, obviously, in this football game when you look at how these two teams stack up. So, I mean, it's kind of a brief little thumbnail on the bowl game. When we get closer, we'll obviously look more into, what I actually want to see from who and what spots in the ball game, because while it's not necessarily building momentum as a team towards next season, I think certain players can take that step. Like, we were all really interested to see Garrett Nussmeier in the bowl game a season ago because it was his first start at LSU, and how is he going to lead the team and things of that nature, and could that pole vault him into a great year? And obviously it did. He was able to really get his feet wet in a game that you didn't have a whole bunch of pressure on you in, and then ultimately led a great comeback actually for LSU as well when pressure did ratchet up. So I think there's situations like that to watch with some of the young guys. Can they start their development? Can they treat this kind of like the first rendition of spring ball, if you will, right here? They're going through practices, the game, start to really jumpstart their development, and then really be able to hit the ground running in spring ball. And you see some of these young guys that emerge really take the step and be contributors for you on next year's team. That's how you're going to build depth with everything you've brought in the portal and in the recruiting class, and that's how you have a really strong roster. And that, friends, is how you compete at the highest level for championships at a place like LSU. So, again, we'll have plenty of time to get into that. I'll compile a list of guys I really, really want to see, and we'll go through that as we get closer to the bowl game. But for now, that's going to wrap it up here for today. Y'all, again, follow on social media, smash the like, get subscribed. All of that greatly appreciated, and be here next time for more on LSU Daily.